Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I'm going to do this care collab a little different. Um, as normally you've either got the camera on a tripod staring at a plant for endless minutes while I waffle on, or you've got me waggling the camera around and everybody getting seasick. So I thought I'd combine the two this time, and instead of having the camera on the tripod, we'll actually have a look at the blooms on the plant in question and fix on those while I waffle, and then we'll get to look at the real plant towards the end. Normal Care Collab protocol. The other two channels, only two this time, joining me are Orchidea and What's Up Orchids, and the links to their video sections on their channel will actually be in the description should you want to go and see their version. Okay, so Dendrobium senile. It's formerly known as the white-haired Dendrobium or the old man orchid, but far more important than any of that nonsense is on my channel it's called Mr. Hairy, which seems to have taken off, and people even refer to it that way. Anyway, it comes from around, basically around Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, those sort of areas, and that's true about many of the Dendrobiums. Simple as that, they do come from that part of the world. Important things to note about not only where, but always how high. Because that will give you your idea about temperature ranges, because most of the places where it comes from are going to have similar weather patterns and temperature ranges. So the height off the ground is often the important bit, and when you see a plant that doesn't make any references whatsoever to sea level, you can virtually guarantee it's not going to be a warm to hot grower. So when you get 5,000 meters upwards to beyond 1,200 and more, the temperature range is quite varied. That's so you don't have to worry too much about it. Okay, but I would class it as intermediate. I wouldn't class it as a cool grower as such because of its daytime temperatures it would get in those areas during the growing season. So it's not a cool grower. It doesn't grow high enough up to become a cool grower. Formerly, this Dendrobium is in the Formosae section, which is endearingly known as the black hair types, which is strange because it has, well, silvery grey hairs, but I think it's the hairy bit that's the important bit. There are some writings that show this in the Dendrobium section, the silliest of all the sections, because it's the Dendrobium section of the Dendrobiums. Duh. Anyway, most people accept that it's in the hairy brethren. So this tends to bloom late spring in the UK into the summer months. Basically, it's not a late winter, early spring bloomer by any means. There's quite a good reason for why that happens, is its weather patterns. In the areas it comes from, they tend to be semi-deciduous forests, so in amongst the tree canopy are some deciduous trees, which means in the drier season, I'm going to try not to refer to the expression winter or summer. In the drier months, when the trees dump their leaves, the light levels go up, even down at the forest floor, because despite there still being some evergreen trees with leaf cover, there's great big holes in it from the deciduous trees, so a lot more light comes in that drier season, and this has an important influence on this type of Dendrobium. So growing season, you've got full light cover, so it doesn't need high light, not to grow, not in the growing season, and they get rather a lot of rain, so heavy on the watering. I wouldn't go mad on the feeding. I'd still class this as a little bit delicate, this plant, so it doesn't need high feed. But what it needs in the growing season is regular feed. That's the important bit. Not plenty of it each time, but plenty of times when it gets it. So keep it growing well during your growing season. And we get specific to the UK now. We get long summer days, short winter days. That's specific to the UK. So when this plant is in the UK winter, it's all wrong, because it should be at its brightest light point bearing in mind that the day lengths where this comes from don't vary much either side of 12 hours, and we're down to 8. And that light is often poor quality. You know, everybody moans about the English weather, it's always damp and miserable. Well, that's low light, you know, and for a short amount of time. So this plant, under normal circumstances in the UK in the winter, needs to be given the brightest light you possibly can, and it still probably won't be enough. But it'll do, because I've got mine to bloom pretty good. So there we go, that's your sort of bit of the seasons. And the important bit of the season is a little bit of oddity. They say it's the brighter light and the drop in temperature in winter that sparks off the blooms. Not on this one, it's not. It's very strange what sparks off the blooms on this one, because it will go all through that bright season, you know, with greatly reduced water and hardly any feed, all that sort of stuff, you know, winter semi-rest, I'll call it. So it goes through all that, and then in the UK, it starts getting better. The day lengths start getting longer. You might get a bit of sunshine now and again, which raises your temperatures up. That's the bit that triggers this one. Yeah? It's that rise in temperature during the days that don't necessarily make a blind bit of difference to the low nights. So the difference between the day and the night temperatures suddenly becomes greater. And it's that increase in temperature, which may only be for 2 or 3 weeks before the rains start, that trigger the buds. Yeah, so it's not really the winter bit that does it. It's that bit at the end, that little bit that triggers them into bloom as the temperatures rise before the rains come. Yeah, and that's when it likes to bloom, in that little sort of period there. So that's its oddity. Now, real temperatures with this one, daytime averages are going to be up, heading towards 30, 28, 29, something like that. And during those summer months, they're probably not going to drop down much below 18, something like that. You know, so normal sort of intermediate. If it gets a bit cooler at night, it's not the end of the world. So that's, you know, that's that sort of thing. But what happens where this comes from is in the spring, the daytime temperatures go up, but the nights don't. So that range increases, as I said before. So and then the rains come, and obviously we get the associated, growing period where we've got the rains. And the main difference is that the daytime temperature doesn't really go up a lot during that period, because the rain keeps cooling it down. But what does go up is the nighttime temperatures. Yeah, so they're nowhere near as low. So the gap between the day and the night greatly decreases during the growing season. So that's all about sort of the conditions that it would come in where it grows in the wild. We're not growing it in the wild. Now, please, as far as this plant is concerned, don't take any notice of the ancient writings and scrolls and runes that have come out of the Ark. This does not need a winter rest. If you withhold water from the beginning of November till the middle of February, you are highly likely to have a dead plant. It's not going to make it. You know, you'd need incredibly high humidity all the time to enable it to survive that treatment. But what it will enjoy during those months is you can stop the feed, because it's probably going to stop growing anyway. Certainly in the UK it will, because it hasn't got the day lengths. It hasn't got the daytime temperatures normally. So it's going to slow right down or stop. So a trickle of water, I mean, in my case, probably about every 7 to 10 days, something like that. But it'll depend on how often the sun came out. That's all it is, basically. Does the sun come out during that period? In which case it warms up a little bit. But one thing I will say is this has got a fragile ecosystem. It grows its roots very slowly. So any disturbance in that process interrupts the plant's well-being. And it can be quite dramatic as well. So some say that this grows better in a pot than on a mount. Well, stupid statement. I love these stupid statements. It goes alongside Water Weekly. Cobblers. If you're going to grow this in a pot, yes, it may well do well in a pot. But what are you going to put in the pot with it? Without elaborating, you can't just say it grows better in a pot. You know, what, you're going to grow it on top of a single lump of lava rock in your pot? You're going to grow it in tiny seedling bark? You're going to grow it in compacted sphagnum moss where there's no air? You know, it's just a stupid statement to say it grows better in a pot. It can grow in a pot. It can grow on a mount. And that will depend on your circumstances, your watering frequencies, and how you want to do it. Mine grows on a mount. That way I've got full control in the winter time. Because in the summertime, when it's growing well, I'm just going to chuck water on it. Whole plant, just dunk it, get it wet, keep it going, strong. But come the winter time, I don't want those roots getting soggy or staying wet too long. Not in those low temperatures. It's not going to be happy with that. That's not what would happen where it comes from. So you have to make your judgments. So summing this thing up, disturb the roots as little as possible. Try and make sure there's some active roots growing if you're going to mess with them. I grow it on a mount. You can grow it in a pot. Your judgment call, yeah? But take care not to disturb the root. Basic, absolute minimum root disturbance. Get it settled in somewhere and try and leave it there as long as possible, which is why I like it mounted. So that's that part of it. Yeah, and just think of its conditions, where it comes from, the sort of conditions it would get winter time, and then try and adjust that for your own winter time. What it would get in its growing season, that's the easy bit. And yeah, there we go. Right, so what we'll do now is we'll go and have a quick look at my plant. And for those of you who haven't seen my plant for some time, you're in for quite a shock. Let's go out in the grow room. Okay, and for those of you who haven't found out why or heard why, the reason why this doesn't look anywhere near as good as it once did was I had a serious problem on my mount. Now what happened was that the moss over time turned into a basic solid lump of live moss. And it did actually start to look like the sort of moss you'd get growing, you know, at the base of a tree or on a bank, you know, deep in the grass. Had a very solid look about it. And the plant stopped growing. There was something wrong and I wasn't sure what. So, you know, as I've said, most troubles occur below ground, and that can include on a mount, below the moss, the bit you can't see, because this had turned into like a solid lump. So I took it off the mount, and lo and behold, the roots in the main had died, and the reason was that a very rare occurrence had occurred under the moss. The cork bark had completely rotted. So between the moss and the rotten cork bark, had a highly acidic environment, totally alien to what the roots needed, so the roots had died. So I basically lost virtually all my roots. So I thought, well, we ain't giving up. There were some signs of some new shoots, so I thought there's some life in here yet. It's just not going to progress without help. So got a new piece of cork bark, got some new live moss, so not the zombie moss. Some new live moss, which will never compact solid because of the type of moss it is. And we spread the pieces around on top of the moss and didn't put any moss on top of the older roots, simply because they would probably just rot. So there's plenty of air around the base of this plant. We now have quite a few new growths coming out in many places, some of which have already started to root. So this will generate a new root system under these new growths. It will recover. Now this is pieces. I bought a plant, and when I got it home, it was pieces. So I started with pieces, and that's what I've still got. Some of these pieces may not survive. This little tiny piece down here might not make it. It's just that cane and a little one hanging off of it. That is the piece. So they might not all make it, but there's enough that will. So this plant will recover. It will be allowed and helped to grow on well this year with all these new growths to hopefully get some reasonable sized canes. And if they are still growing when I get to my winter, they will not get rested in any shape or form. They will get put in a nice warm place in here, one of the warmer places, you know, up above the heater, that sort of thing, and kept growing. And then we'll grow it on again through next year. All the time the root system's getting better. The canes are getting bigger and stronger, and next year more canes will grow. The following year, we might think about letting it bloom. but not until then. A bloom on here would just sap the strength, so we're not doing it. So that's the state of play with my plant. Recovering. It's in a serious state of recovery, but it is doing it, and I have every confidence that it will continue to do so. So this time next year we should have a good looking plant again, but it isn't now. But at least I knew why, investigated, found the problem and dealt with it, and that's really what growing orchids is all about. It's you know, when your orchid just carries on growing fine, there isn't really much work to do, is there? Your work is on the ones that aren't doing well and finding out what's wrong with them and trying to put it right. So we will recover, Mr. Hairy. It will get better. So anyway, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.